Welcome to the God in Me presentation. We're going to focus today on Lesson 1. First of all, God in Me is our RED program. RED stands for the blood of Christ, the love of God, and that reflects our theme, which is best friends with Jesus. If you look at the table of contents, you're going to see 4 lessons. It's just a nice little program. We're going to start out in Lesson 1 with God created me. And we want kids to know that God created them, knows them, calls them by name. They're not random. They're not by accident. And not only did God create them, but God loved them so much that in Lesson 2, Jesus is God's gift to me. And we're going to learn that Jesus is our Savior. We're going to memorize John 3:16. And then when we have someone, a best friend like Jesus, what do? You talk with him. So lesson 3 is going to be, I can talk with God. It's going to be a nice lesson on prayer. And the final lesson will be, because God cares for me, I can care for others. So there's just this natural progression and just a real nice program. When we start out on the introductory page on page 3, kids are going to tell a story. Here's an adult. Children are gathered around the adult. Then they're going to imagine that this is Jesus. And parents have brought their children to Jesus to be blessed by him. And they're going to draw themselves in the picture because they're loved by Jesus. Jesus will bless them. At the bottom, we're going to introduce the concept of a game box. God and Me exploring box. And after each lesson, children will make a game to add to their game box. It's a game that they can play with their families and to remember what they've studied. Section 1. God created me. First thing we're going to ask our kids to do is be creative. Create a pet out of this scribble line. And we've seen butterflies, inchworms, birds, elephants, horses, whales, you name it. And why not have everyone in the family create their own scribble pet? After they've been creative, then we're going to do the first story. It's going to be the creation story out of Genesis. And we're going to ask the kids to consider the 6 days of creation and put them in order. And the account of creation is not a scientific explanation of how God created the world, but it does show the kids that there was a plan, there was order put over chaos, there was a design. And as they read the account and they hear that God created and saw that it was good, just to have that appreciation and wonder at the creation story. That's what we're going for. They're going to consider what the Sabbath means. What does it mean to be created in the image of God? And after they've read the creation story and discussed that, they're going to put a picture of themselves on page 6. And because God created them, and they're going to ask their family members to write in their book, to write down the good qualities that they see in the child. Story 2 in lesson 1 is God calls me by name, and they're going to read the passage from Isaiah. Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I've called you by name. You are mine. And it goes on and says, because since you are precious in my sight, and because I love you. Our God is a personal God who knows us and cares for us and calls us by name. And when we know this God, then we're going to give praise to God. I'm going to read some verses out of Isaiah, and then the child will write their own psalm of praise. The lesson concludes, as every lesson will in God and Me, with hands. We're going to pretend that these are God's creative hands, and you're going to draw a picture in these hands to remind you, so that you can remember what you studied. And you're going to make a game. In lesson 1, it's going to be a memory game. You're going to draw 12 matching pairs of animals or things in God's creation, and you are going to include yourself in there because God created you. And every time you find a pair, you have to say, God created me and said that it was good. The final requirement will be a family project. And one of the choices is go outside and stargaze, or go outside and look at the clouds in the sky and just enjoy being out in God's creation. Lesson 1, God created me.